folks, welcome back to Crows Before Bros. This is a YouTube channel that I run with my friend Lauren, and we just talk about books. So a quick check-in. I've kind of talked about my November reads in both our Pride and Prejudice and now upcoming our Every Summer After video, but here's like a quick look at the ones I liked. Other than that, I didn't really read anything worth writing home about. They were pretty like mid-range for me. I feel like I had a lot of like 3.5 star reads. Beyond that, I've kind of just been playing Sims and going crazy because it's December. I kind of had big lofty goals for all these books I was going to read in December, and I think I'm going to try to ditch a lot of those goals and instead read things that are cozy and just like things that I've really wanted to read for a while but haven't got to, and instead of focusing on numbers, just focusing on enjoying reading. So the year's nearly done. We're now in December, and I wanted to do a quick look back at some of my favorite series, as in like series plural. So my favorite multiple series that I've read this year. I'm gonna do just kind of a speedy recap of my top 3 that I read this year. These are ones that I've like completed the whole series. I'd like to give some honorable mentions before we get started. I'm not going to go into detail about these, but I really enjoyed the Inheritance Games series. It's super popular right now, but I feel like if you are just trying to get back into reading, if you really like Knives Out, the movie, if you just like books that are like riddly and trying to figure things out in hidden compartments and houses built on like mysteries on mysteries and riddles on riddles, it's so fun. I would personally adopt Xander Hawthorne. He is just such a golden retriever character. I loved him. And then I also this year discovered that there's the Heroes of Olympus series. Somehow, despite being a huge Percy Jackson kid, I missed that. So I read the Heroes of Olympus series for the first time this year and just like loved it. It was so fun. It was such like a nostalgic trip, even though I hadn't read it before. Similarly to Xander, I would adopt Nico D'Angelo. I love both those characters as if they were my own children. I've not birthed a human, but I imagine my love for these fictional characters that somebody created in their head would be the same. The first series I'm going to talk about, I've actually talked about a number of times on this channel already, which is wild because we haven't existed very long, but I've talked about this one a few times because it was just one of my top reads of the year. It's definitely the most popular series on this recap. I fully think it deserves the hype. It's so good. So first one is the Folk of the Air series by Holly Black. Cool Prince, Wicked King, Queen of Nothing, all 5 out of 5. So it's a trilogy following the main character Jude as she lives in a fae world as a human and becomes kind of steeped in the political drama of this world. Her dad is like kind of this war general, and she has this ongoing rivalry with the prince, and she just becomes like very involved in this political structure. While this book is primarily a fantasy book and focuses mostly on the look of power and politics in this fictional world, there's a huge like romance subplot. That's often what people think of when they think of these books, but I was honestly really invested in the politics and that of it also. So yeah, the romance happens with the Prince Cardan, who she had this rivalry with, and he is, would you say, a cruel prince? Wow. This is a true enemies to lovers, folks. I thought I knew what enemies to lovers was. I was out here reading like the Unhoneymooners or the Hating Game. False. These are not enemies to lovers. Those are people who mildly annoy each other to lovers. It has made so many other enemies to lovers books pale in comparison for me. I genuinely hated Cardan at the beginning. I went into it knowing that Jude and Cardan end up in a relationship, and I started and I was like, absolutely not. He is irredeemable. He is so bad. He is just like an awful person. How could I ever root for this guy? And like, he is absolutely irredeemable. He has only red flags. He's a horrible character. What Holly Black did was she then took the main female character and made her worse, where a lot of romance novels bring, you know, that broken boy up to the girl's level and tries to make him good enough for her. Holly Black flipped that on its head and instead said, how do I make the female character just so much more like awful and irredeemable. She did a fabulous job of creating characters that somehow, even though they were like terrible people, I was rooting for them. I was on their side. I understood what they were going through. I just loved them. Holly Black needs to pay for my therapy. This series has genuinely good world building, especially for like a YA series, which is like, I find really hit or miss. It gave us characters that are complex, that are hateable and lovable in the same breath. Jude is probably my favorite main character that I've read this year. She's chef's kiss. She's so good. In my second place spot for series I've read this year is the Gilded Wolves series by Roshani Chokshi. I picked up the series initially because I saw a lot of comparisons that were like, if you liked Six of Crows, read this book. As such, I kind of entered the series expecting to be a bit disappointed. It's often hard when people are like, oh, this is just like your favorite thing, to not be like, is it though? I did go in with the expectation to be disappointed, but Roshani brought it. She did so good. This series honestly goes off. Now, while it is a series that follows kind of 6 young adults as they complete a heist and become this kind of ragtag found family situation, and it does feel comparable at times to Six of Crows, I honestly do feel like it stands up as its own series separate from that comparison. At the end of the day, I think this one has a very unique magic system and stuff. I think it also, the first book is like quite comparable, but the series pivots from where Six of Crows goes. So the first book takes place in Paris in 1889. It feels a little dark academia throughout it. It revolves around secret societies and ancient artifacts. We follow Severin as the leader of kind of this ragtag gang of young adults as they hunt down a lost artifact, and this lost artifact is going to reinstate Severin's lost inheritance. Now, was I confused a lot of the time reading this series? Yes, but in a way that I like. Sometimes I find that young adult fantasy treats me like I'm 4 years old and I'm stupid and I can't work things out, where the series just throws you in and you kind of have to figure out what's happening along the way. It leads to like a feeling that this world exists and I am just kind of like popping into the story, but that it existed before and it'll exist after I'm done reading. It feels like an actually developed world. This one is also full of great characters. There is kind of a direct Kinej comparison. However, I think, again, their relationship plays out quite differently. Definitely a top series I read this year. There are moments where I was like gasping. One of the books ends on like a big cliffhanger and I was like, oh my goodness, it was so good. And it has like very interesting relationships between characters that I was really invested in. The characters are so complex and I just like adored their dynamics. It was such a fun read. My third and top choice, I think, for the year is the Unwind series by Neal Shusterman. Now, you might recognize the name Neal Shusterman because he also wrote the Scythe series, which is a more popular series of his that I haven't yet got to. Unwind is the least popular of the series that I'm mentioning this video, but I would hazard to say that it is my favorite. The Unwind series, he calls it the Unwind dystology. It consists of 4 books and then a final book that's just a collection of short stories that happens at different points throughout and after the series takes place. Honestly, all the books are really impactful in very different ways. They all feel a little bit different, but still really, really meaningful reads. Conceptually, Unwind is set in a world where there had been a civil war regarding reproductive rights, and the solution that kind of scientists and governments came up with was a ban on abortion. They made human life inviolable. So every baby that is conceived is raised to be age 13 at least. It's honestly so wild. If you like have a baby and you don't want it, you can stork it, which is literally like ditching your baby on your neighbor's doorstep, and then that neighbor has like a legal obligation to raise this child. Once a youth is 13 until they're the age of 18, the legal guardian then has the right to, quote, unwind the teenager. In this world, scientists have found a way to use kind of every single part of the human body essentially as an organ donation. So being unwound is essentially being like taken apart for parts and having all those individual parts of you distributed to whoever needs it or is willing to pay for those parts.
Oh, hi, Stacy. Glad to see you're back to work.
Oh, hi, Johnny. What's up?
Just checking in.
Yeah, it finally happened. I've been waiting for years and years for this surgery to happen. And I know lots of people are waiting for like good brains or strong arms, but well, you know that my needs were like a little different.
Oh yeah.
My donation actually came from like just some punk kid. He like never cleaned his house, I guess? I don't know. This kid might have been a punk, but he had a huge dump truck.
So the first book follows a trio of individuals all set to be unwound. The first, his parents just kind of was like, we're done with you, you're, a punk kid. The second was a girl who was in essentially like a children's group care situation for prodigies who were like being raised up to sell their like parts of their brain to like rich people who wanted specific things. So for example, she's really good at piano, but she fails an exam. And so she's going to be unwound. And the third follows Levi, who's a tithe, which is like the craziest part of the series for me. Essentially people who have big families, if like they have 10 kids, the 10th kid is given up to the government as a tithe. Levi was like raised to be a tithe. Follows all three of these characters as they kind of escape on purpose for some, accidentally for others from their being unwound, and finding their journey to fight against the practice. We also get to see a character in later books who is made entirely of unwound parts. He's like this Frankenstein man. We get to kind of watch him try to figure out what he even is, if he's a human, how he should behave in certain situations. It's honestly so wild. It's really intense and really beautiful throughout the whole series. I think for me, this series especially stands out because it falls less in the classic YA dystopian, good versus evil, kids fight the government. Like, there is that. But I think this series did a beautiful job at making it more complicated than like the kids are good and the government is bad. We see different ways that different groups handle their outrage at these practices. We see the government try to like change public opinion of them. We see rebellion groups that handle things really, really well and also handle things really, really poorly. I think it's a lot more thorough and real feeling than a lot of kind of dystopian YA novels. It feels like something that could genuinely happen if the science were to like exist to make this be a reality. This series has moments that are chilling to the core, and I just really see it as being one that I will pick up again and again. I really, really loved reading this series. Those are my favorite series that I've read this year. What are your guys's? I'm hoping to pick up in the next year V.E. Schwab's Villain series. I might start touching on the Cassandra Clare Shadowhunters books, which I've never read, and I'm a little scared because there's so many books in like this world that she's created. I also kind of want to start digging into some more high fantasy, like maybe some Brandon Sanderson or something. But similar to the Cassandra Clare books, sometimes when series are like so overwhelmingly large, I get a little scared. Thanks for watching. Tell me your favorite series that you read this year, or your favorite series of all time. I'm very partial to like the ones I grew up reading, Percy Jackson, Harry Potter, Hunger Games, but I think it's so cool that like even as an adult I can pick up some of these other series and have them be so impactful to me, even though they're like all three of the ones that I listed today were young adult series. I think they all were like so well written and so interesting. If you like this video, do all the YouTube things, like, comment, subscribe, turn on your notifications. Lauren and I right now are doing about 3 videos a month, so stay tuned for some other content. We love you guys. Bye.